All right, well, welcome. Thank you so much for joining us. This is Steve Bonoff, President of Printing Industry Midwest, and we're so happy that you're here today with us at our SmartCafe. This event, as we do often in January, we focus on the efforts of our environmental health and safety team in keeping our industry safe. So we have an exciting event planned to you today. And the reason why I'm sure many of you are here is that this has been a top issue for our industry over the last 2 years. We've been working hard at keeping our members safe from COVID and the elements that have been brushing against us for so long, and keeping our employees keeping our employees safe has really been just a top mission of all of our members. And we know that keeping Osha at bay is just as important in many ways, because that's what really keeps your doors open, allows you to keep your employees employed and to keep your doors open. So we've been working hard over the last few days and weeks preparing for this event, making sure that we're addressing all of your most urgent questions as it relates to Osha and keeping, like I said, your employees, you're safe and your doors open. We have a jam-packed event today. We're going to be perhaps going over our 12:30 time frame. This event is going to be recorded, so you'll be able to get copies of the slides as well as get the full recording and to view it if you have to leave. We want to make sure that you participate on this event, and so there is a Q&A function on today's webinar. So it's not a chat function. The Q&A is where we'd like you to host your questions, where we can keep track of them. Kathy on our staff will be monitoring that regularly and making sure that any questions you have, she'll be able to address them immediately. Otherwise, if there's something we need to research, we'll get back to you as soon as we get those answers. One thing I wanted to mention, there's a couple things we wanted to make sure you know what's coming up. We have March 3rd, Young Professionals is coming back to Top Golf. That's really a top event for the association over the last couple of years. We're going to be happy to be back at Top Golf now, and with now conditions allowing that to happen. So make sure that you support that. We have the Star Awards, of course. The submissions for that is coming up also very quickly. February 16th is our deadline for submissions. Make sure that you're getting the people on your staff who are accountable for submitting your winning prints. We want to make sure you're included. And then the third item is we do have a growing number of members who are adding our valued health benefits through our partnership with Gravy. If you aren't aware of this, make sure you check our website. All the contact information that you need and details about the program are online. We also want to welcome our Gravy partner, who's a sponsor of the event today, to share just a couple minutes about this program and how you as a member can benefit. So Jacob, thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate your support.
Yeah, thanks, Steve. I appreciate you having me, and thank you to everybody that's joined and allowed me to, I guess, message Gravy over to you here for a few minutes this morning. And I'll be brief. I know health insurance isn't the most exciting topic for us all, but I think what we're doing here in our partnership with PIM is extremely important to know about, and can offer your company great savings with better benefits as well. So a little very brief background on Gravy. We are headquartered in Minneapolis there. So kind of in the backyard with what I'm assuming is the majority of your headquartered locations as well. We've been in business now since 2013, and we actually happen to be one of the fastest growing companies across the country right now, and that's not just in the health insurance space. Gravy's been partnered now with PIM here probably around the past 6 to 12 months. We've added a handful of employers to our platform as well, and through our health insurance offerings. That it's been very successful, and we're looking forward to really an exciting partnership for years to come. Very brief, kind of high level overview of what we're doing here at Gravy is we really recognized some of the core issues that are happening with traditional health benefits today, being many employees are frustrated with the lack of coverage that they receive on common healthcare services, and really kind of that shift towards high deductible, high out-of-pocket max health plans at times felt benefits were sometimes almost not worth having because you weren't hitting those numbers. You were paying that premium each and every month without really seeing much of a benefit in return. And so what kind of makes Gravy unique is we have a product called Comfort that has no deductibles. It has no copays on those common healthcare services. So primary care, urgent care, labs and imaging, generic prescriptions, online care, specialty visits, all are at no cost to the member. So what we're really doing there is providing a lot more value back to an entire employee base. They're paying their premium each and every month, and then are not having those barriers of entry. They're not having to pay something each and every time they have an office visit. They're not having surprised bills a month later after maybe going to a primary. Maybe you're sent down the hall for labs and imaging, and a couple of weeks later you're dinged with a bill. So removing a lot of that confusion as well. And know that we're partnered with national leading networks as well. So we're not looking to have any disruption to your employee base in terms of who they're having access to. We're utilizing Preferred One and their most broad network there in Minnesota. We also use Aetna, Cigna networks of that sort as well. Know that not just a product company, we take our support experience at the highest regard. Your employee base is supported from a one-on-one basis, not only through the enrollment process, but year-round as well. So really our goal here at Gravy, let's reduce your costs. Let's offer better benefits to your employees across the board, kind of help with that retention and recruitment, make things a lot more simpler. And again, just provide a lot more value across the board to your employee base. So if there's any questions, if you'd like to get in contact, learn more, please reach out to Steve or the team at PIM, and we're happy to get any of those questions or feedback answered. So I appreciate you guys allowing me to be here today, and hopefully we'll be connecting again soon.
Okay, terrific. I know we've had another new member. Another member just joined the Gravy team just over the last month. Had a lot of savings, a lot of cost savings, at the same time adding actual benefits to their employees. So we're really excited that we'll be able to provide that to them and many more members as the months come on. Thanks a lot. So when we want to turn to the topic at hand, and we're going to bring on our environmental health and safety experts, Paul Gutkowski and Kathy Malinowski. Many of you, I'm sure, know them well, and we so appreciate their time and expertise. And so we're going to turn it over to you, and if you could, Bren, bring up their slides, and Paul, welcome, and we'll let you take it away.
All right, there we go. So there's three main things that I want to kind of focus on here in today's presentation, and feel free to ask questions as I go through the slides. Kathy's going to keep an eye on those slides, and when she sees questions, she'll say, Paul, there was a question on slide number 3 or something. I don't think you have a question on slide number 3 when you see slide number 3, but just an example. Ask questions as I go through, but three main things I want to kind of focus on. Number one, how does OSHA know to inspect your building and your facility? Why are they still showing up every few years at your company? What's the purpose? Why are they there? How do they get in the door? Number two, then, when they come in the door, what are they looking for? And I'm only going to hit the most common citations that affect printers in our 5-state regions. And you can actually search for that information from the different OSHA programs. In the states of North, South Dakota, Nebraska, those are federal OSHA states. Iowa's a state OSHA program, but they pretty much follow what the feds are doing or not doing. State of Minnesota has their own OSHA program, and they will have a little different emphasis at times. So I'm going to cover the main things that they're going to look for, but by no means, if you correct even just these items that I talk about today, are you going to be able to get away with no citations. So they will pick on few other items when they walk around your facility, do an inspection of your company. And so I'm mainly going to talk about how they get in your door, what are they looking for the most part, for us printers in our 5-state region. And the last part is going to be things that you can do and prepare for better, so that you're not too scared about what's going to go on. The other thing I want to let you know about is that Kathy and I have been in your shoes before. We've been in this safety and environmental area for, tons of years. Don't walk away thinking, oh, now I can't sleep tonight at all because of these scary slides and things that I don't know if we're covering these items or not. Make sure that you pass them along to your supervisor or your boss. That's a mistake a lot of people make, thinking that they'll pass them out to the plant manager or the owner or the president of the company and they won't do anything about it. Don't make that mistake. Let them know about your concerns, that you should have these things addressed, looked at. You're doing nothing. You got to share this information with somebody else, because when an inspector from the EPA shows up or OSHA shows up, when you might get caught in that situation saying, well, I didn't think my boss was going to do anything about it. That's why I didn't alert him or her to that information. Pass that information along so that you can get some help and advice to get these things taken care of. All right, so, and just a little reminder, it is not a small town in Wisconsin, OSHA. All right, so quick quiz here. Which would you rather have? Root canal or an OSHA inspection? I think I can hear a lot of people saying that they'd rather have root canal. I don't know about that. Anyway, sometimes when they show up, you might feel like this. OSHA on one side over here, you as the prey on the other side. You might feel that anxiety when they show up in your door, and they could show up at any time of day, in the morning, in the afternoon. You might not be even there, and they're going to have to go and see somebody else when they're going to want to walk through that facility of yours. You might feel like this, but we're going to try to help you feel less anxious and anxiety driven by covering this information. So how do they get in the door? All right, what's happening here is that an employee may file a complaint with OSHA, and they're going to come out and do an inspection, but not at all time. And some of you people who are attending here may have had this experience where OSHA may feel that it's not worth their time to come out to your facility, so they're going to send a letter to your company. And then they're going to say, well, can you investigate this, get back to us, send us a letter. We've got this employee complaint. This has happened many times for me and Kathy. It may be a safety-related issue, or the other thing you should keep in mind is that OSHA is divided into occupational safety experts and occupational health experts or industrial hygienists. Again, if you have any questions on the OSHA or the environmental areas, give us a call. Kathy and I are well-versed in industrial hygiene. So, for example, if you have an employee complaint saying that they're exposed to chemicals, get a hold of us. We can handle those issues very well, help you out, get that air sampled, get that letter over to OSHA so that they don't have to come in your building to investigate that employee complaint. If it's air-related, industrial hygiene-related, occupational health-related to your company. So they might come in because there's an employee complaint filed. It might be a referral, and we'll get into more detail in a few other slides later on. Might be a referral from another agency. Maybe it's an imminent danger situation that somebody notices, calls OSHA up, says, you got to get out to this facility like right away. Fatality catastrophe, that's something that you may not be aware of, that's changed over the years on the requirement for companies to call OSHA within a certain time frame so that they could investigate, maybe come out, do an inspection, or send a letter, depending on what the phone call was about to OSHA. This catches a lot of us printers, this national local emphasis program, as far as why they're coming into our facilities in printing. And we'll talk about that as to why we're on this list. And follow-up might be another reason why they would come into our facility. Let's say they did an inspection, they found a lot of problems in this area, and they're going to send another inspector, or maybe the same inspector, to check up to make sure that you did do what you said you were going to do when you sent your correspondence over to OSHA, and all the money that you spent on machine guarding, whatever you did, they're going to follow up on that. They don't do too much of those things, although I think in the future they have a potential to pick up that pace. So an employee complaint, what happens is if there's an employee complaint, the OSHA inspector will not reveal the name of the person who complains. They're not even told that. Someone at OSHA does know who did complain. Sometimes you can figure out who complained. For example, if it's in your pre-press area and there's only 2 employees there and the complaint is related to your pre-press operation, you probably could figure out who might have filed the complaint. I do advise you, do not fire that person. There's another part of OSHA that's going to investigate an employee complaint being fired because they filed a complaint with OSHA. Just handle it as best as you can. I've got some other tips later on in today's presentation on what you can do to try to minimize people sending. Their last resort is to go to OSHA and file a complaint with OSHA to investigate that company. You can try to do some things to try to eliminate that possibility. Now, again, on this item too, you might get a letter from OSHA. They may not, if they don't think it's really warranted their time, they may send you a letter. They may send you a letter and say, investigate this situation, get back to us. Send us a letter, tell us what went wrong, how you're going to fix these problems, that kind of thing. The referral is from another agency. That might happen if you have an inspector from in the Metro County area over here, from Hennepin County, Ramsey County, what have you, and they'll come into the building and they'll say, boy, this doesn't look quite right. I don't know a lot about OSHA regulations, but they're going to contact OSHA and say, come on out to this facility and investigate. And they might go the other way around too. So you might see OSHA coming out, they're concerned about some environmental issues. They're going to call up the Minnesota Pollution Control Agency, EPA, or whoever, and say, I think you need to come out and do a visit here. So they might come in under what's called the referral. And an imminent danger situation is any condition that presents an immediate harm that anybody sees anywhere. It could be a neighbor, someone outside, someone inside, or what have you, a visitor. And if that is filed with OSHA, then it would be an imminent danger situation, and they could come out for that reason too. All right. There's some other reasons why they would come into your building. Fatality catastrophe. This happens when someone in your company notifies OSHA because there's been a fatality or there's been hospitalization that's occurred. We'll talk a little bit more about that in detail a little bit later on in another slide here. The National Local Emphasis Program. So we're tapped into this investigation based on a couple of factors that OSHA takes a look at. And they get this information when they send out surveys, they get information, and they're not specifically looking at maybe your particular company, but they look at industry groups, foundries, scrap metal dealers, machine shops, printing companies. They look at those injury rates, and they will put the whole group on an emphasis program and inspect those companies more than somebody else, more than your neighbor's company, when they're looking at 2 different rates. Severity is one thing that they're going to look at, and we actually do pretty good in that area. We don't have a lot of people that are seriously injured that are out for a long period of time. But the other rate that they're looking at is just frequency. And I think that's why they're tapping into our industry a little bit more, is because we might have a little bit of injuries that are going on there that are on that OSHA 300 form, which we'll talk about a little bit later on. And if we have more frequency than our other neighbor partners in other industry groups, they're going to pick on us too. Because even if they see things that are more severe injuries that are occurring more than other industries, or they see that there's just more frequency of even minor injuries that are going on, then they're going to inspect those kind of companies. And I think that's why we're in that kind of category. We get cuts, we get some minor injuries, people come on back to work. We list them on the OSHA 300 log, and again, all that information does get looked at as far as what particular industry groups are they going to pick on this year or in the next few years, and that's what's got us printers in that group. So that's maybe a more common reason why when they knock on your door, they're going to say, you're just on the list through this emphasis program that OSHA's got going on. Follow-up is, again, what I mentioned a little bit earlier, is that if there are previous citations, and if you have a lot of citations, there's a lot of serious citations, there's a lot of fines, there's a potential that they would come back to make sure that you did address those citations that you said in your paperwork and you send OSHA that you did do. All right. So this accident reporting part, now this has actually occurred a few years ago, so you may or may not be aware of this, where someone needs to call OSHA And even if it's on a Saturday or Sunday, that's why you see the phone number over there to call OSHA. Somebody's going to be able to answer that phone 7 days a week, 24 hours a day. If there's a fatality at your facility, you got to call OSHA within 8 hours. Now, you need to contact OSHA within 24 hours if there's a hospitalization, amputation, or an eye loss. Now, when you look at this line on the slide over here, the thing that triggers, in our experience, why people make a phone call over to OSHA and why OSHA may or may not inspect your facility is that amputation part. We still have a few situations occur where somebody gets, their finger nipped or what have you, or their hand might get caught in some moving parts on a press or piece of equipment. So what happens is that if there is an amputation where there's a fingertip loss, we still need to contact OSHA within 24 hours. Now, since this has occurred, this change has occurred, and you can actually get all this detail from the OSHA poster that nobody looks at and reads in your lunchroom. So this detail is actually there on when you need to call OSHA too. If you go to that poster and take a look at what you're supposed to do in these situations. But keep in mind with this amputation, what happens with us printers is that if they get a lot of phone calls and notifications going on, if there is actually a bone loss, they're probably going to come out to your building and get ready to take action and try to fix things before they're actually showing up. If you make a phone call and there's a fingertip missing and no bone loss, they might just send you a letter or they might come on out. You don't know. I'd prepare for the worst, and hope for the best. And they should focus on the problem area itself where the amputation did occur. And we've helped printers out in this area for years on these notifications to OSHA. But keep that in mind. I would not advise you to skip this part, make your notification, and then go through the process there. Okay, so they're going to come into your building for whatever reason, as I mentioned earlier in the other slides. Ask to see that inspector's credentials. It happens very rarely, but because Kathy and I have been in this area for so long, I remember a story back, I don't know, maybe 30 years ago. They had an OSHA inspector's card and they said, "I'm from OSHA," and they let him in. And actually it was a competitor spying on that particular high-tech company. So they have to have not a business card, they have to have an official looking badge or information saying they are who they say they are. So ask to see their inspections. Here's some critical things to take a look at here is ask the inspector, why are they there and what's the intended scope? So what you want to try to do is if you get an inspection based on employee complaint, you want to agree with the inspector or inspectors, if two are showing up over there, that the scope of the inspection will be where the employee complaints are focused on. If you don't want to open up your whole building to a whole wall-to-wall inspection, don't do it. If they come in and say, "No, we're here to do a wall-to-wall inspection because you're on the target program and we're going to come through and look at all the records and the whole building and everything else," well, you don't have much to do there. But if their focus is very specific on an employee complaint or an amputation notification, try to get them to focus only in that area so you don't have to open up the scope to the whole building and all your operations. Once in a while, Kathy and I get this next bullet item here. Can you refuse the entry for the inspector? Yes, you can. That was established in the early days of OSHA, where there is an inspection warrant process if you want to follow that through. Now, a lot of printers don't want to do that because they don't want to get the inspectors mad. I do know in one case in the state of Nebraska and that was federal OSHA territory, that they actually did that. And I think what happened is when they came back with an inspection warrant, that they were upset that they had to go to the judge, get an inspection warrant, and come on back. So they're really picky. On finding only one or two things, but they did have time to be able to take care of all the other stuff that they thought, oh no, we're going to have a lot of problems in all these other areas. So I think it worked out okay for them, but most people don't want to let them go away and come back because they're concerned that the next inspector, the inspector coming back with a warrant, is going to be really tough on that company. But it is something that by law you can actually refuse entry for that inspector. Okay, now when that inspection occurs, they're starting to walk around, look at records and all that other kind of stuff. If you're a union shop, you got to let the union representative know that OSHA's in the building so that the the union representative can be along with the inspector when he goes through or she goes through your whole building and records and everything else. I do advise you to be with that inspector. If they're going to take photographs of particular equipment, if you allow them to take those photographs and there's no trade secrets, take another photograph. Be with that inspector all the time. There's one exception. You'll see it in the next slide over here where you cannot be with the inspector. You don't have to go to the bathroom with them or whatever, the kind of thing like that. But be with that inspector so that you can address anything that he or she questions, wants to know about. When you see an inspector parked in a particular location, asking a lot of questions, taking photographs, that's a warning sign that I think this guy might have a citation in this area over here. So definitely have a lot of questions and answers and discussion with the union, with the inspector as to what he's thinking. Don't volunteer information. When Kathy and I go do audits, you need to have us be aware of all of your questions. But for OSHA and those other government inspectors, you really don't want to offer anything else. Even if you think that you got something perfect on your lockout tagout program and you want to get their input on it, you're opening the door. If they never would ask it, you wouldn't have a potential citation. They still might give you a citation. You think that your program is perfect, they're going to find some problems with it. So you want to treat the inspectors as just answer their questions, let them keep moving along. The quicker they're in and out of your building, the better off it's going to be. You want to ask all those other tough kind of questions from people like Kathy and myself. All right. So one other thing that they're going to take a look at is going to be your OSHA 300 logs. So for companies that have 11 or more employees, make sure you have that OSHA 300 log. Now you may think that, well, we don't have any accidents. There's nothing to record. We have 15 employees. You still got to put zeros on that log. There's the OSHA log where you put the individual person's name on the log and information about the particular injury. And then the OSHA 300A is the summary for the previous calendar year. Everybody should be working on those right now. And even if you have zeros, you still got to put zeros on that log. You still got to post it starting on February 1st. I hope all of you knew that answer. So they're going to take a look at these logs for the last 3 years or so. So make sure that you pull those out of a file, or if they're on somebody's computer. If that person is not there, you got to have access to that kind of stuff. They're not going to wait around and come back another day to get that information. They're there to do an inspection, and they need the information, if you're there or not. And they're going to take a look at the current log, current 300 log there too. All right. So after they take a look at that paperwork and probably other paperwork, when they go through to do their walk around process, take your notes, take your duplicate photographs. If they take photographs, this is the part where you can't be involved. And they may ask to talk to the employee in a quieter area or something like that so they can talk to them privately. They're going to just kind of grab people that are whoever they're going to take a look at, people that are smiling, that they don't want to get yelled at. They're going to interview those people privately. They don't want you to be part of that conversation. What are they going to ask? What are they going to look for? Well, they might find out that there's been no injuries on your OSHA 300 logs. They might ask the question, this seems like a pretty safe company to work for. Are there any accidents that occur over here? And if they get a feedback from the employee saying, yeah, sure, we have some accidents, then they're going to start questioning what they're hearing from you as the representative of management and the other information that you're coming up with on record keeping and training programs. They might ask questions about, you have right to know training. Do you remember anything from the training? And if they give, if the employee gives a response saying, yeah, we use the same VHS tape that skips time and time again, they're going to be set in another direction that you don't want them to be set down to kind of question your programs that you have in place for employee safety. The inspector might measure noise levels or take those air samples, or they may refer it to that other kind of inspector, the occupational health inspector, the industrial hygienist, to come back at another day to take those noise measurements and take the air samples and stuff like that. Anytime in those processes, if I keep forgetting to remind you, reach out to us. You can reach out to us to have more in-depth help at your facility, just email questions, that kind of stuff too. Now, if you can handle some of these hazards immediately, let's say you got a electrical cord that's missing a ground plug, take care of it right away. Get rid of it. You might be able to escape with no citation from that inspector if you can just say, see, thrown away. And that's the only one you're going to find here. Or you know, just try to correct hazards immediately if you can. All right. So as I mentioned a little bit earlier, the inspectors might look around, look for smiley faces, and interview those people. They don't want to have invite a lot of grief and problems in their life if they don't have to. Already it's going to be adversarial maybe when they're inspecting. They may interview. I remember being with a company that we do a lot of work with, and I happened to be in the office. I could go out and help them during their OSHA inspection. They interviewed a temp employee. They can interview your regular employees, they can interview temps. Fortunately, this temp employee gave a lot of the right answers to this OSHA inspector. Whew. So that was really good. But they're going to interview employees. They're going to also interview you guys for sure. They got to interview management, get your side of the story as to what you're doing on the safety areas. Some of them may walk around the facility walls looking for problems. Some of them, I've been told from OSHA inspectors that they're going to look to the maintenance department. One of the things that they're kind of looking there is that if that looks neat and orderly, then they got kind of an impression to think that maybe I think the whole company looks pretty neat and orderly. You know, there's not a lot of mess in the maintenance department. There's not a lot of mess when they're walking around the outside walls of the facility, inside the building. So you want to have a good impression early on when you're coming up with written programs and also the facility walkthrough. What they're looking for is verifying the written documentation that you got to make sure that you're not making up those records for training and written programs. So be careful what you put in writing in your written programs. Take a look at those things so you're not over-promising things, because if you write up a lot of things that you really don't do, then they're going to start questioning other stuff in your written program if you do it or if you don't do it. So you can always verbally explain that you do other extra stuff, but whatever you got in written documentation, make sure that you're doing what you say that you're going to do. Now, in your closing process, the inspector is going to discuss potential citation and maybe other things that they're not going to cite, but they think that you should address. This is the time when you need to discuss those potential citations before he or she leaves the building. When they leave the building and they go talk to their supervisor, they talk to somebody else who wasn't in the building, it gets more difficult to not get those citations on paper, to get those penalties, to get those citations. You want to try to address, they may have heard something and the employee may have given them some wrong information, and you want to say, no, we have a written program. The employee may not be aware that we have a written program for that, but it's right over here. So you want to try to address all those potential citations and try to negotiate before he or she leaves the building. Now, even when you get that letter in the mail, or you have that closing conference on the phone, you have a right to contest the citations. Contest the citations, contest the penalties, and I do advise this one to push back on it, at least have an informal conference with that OSHA inspector. A lot of printers, just like some other companies, don't want to upset those inspectors when they're coming out to the facility. But I do advise that you have an informal conference. You can usually always get those citations, the dollar amount down. Be aware that these penalties are, if you haven't had an inspection lately, the penalties have gone by, increased by a lot lately. Okay, now let's get to the heart of the matter here so we don't run out of too much time. We're going to talk about the most common things that they're going to look at in your facility. Take a guess at what topic we're talking about over there, lockout, tagout. I'm running a little short on time because, boy, do I have the stories to talk about. This is a setup shot here, at least to show you here. But I do remember one time the guy's key was in the lock, and I asked him, why'd you leave the key in the lock? And the guy says, well, so I wouldn't lose the key. Okay, but you don't want to have the key in the lock. Anybody can unlock that situation. Okay, it is lockout, tagout. Very common citation for us printers. Here's what you got to have. Got to have a written program that consists of this. You need to have equipment-specific lockout procedures. There are some exceptions, but you need to have them for equipment that has multiple energy sources, for example, electrical and compressed air, hydraulic and electrical, hardwired electrical. You need to have equipment-specific procedures for your equipment. You need to have employee training. There's two groups that we're talking about over here in employee training. It's going to be training for those people who are authorized to lock out equipment and work on it, and you need to have training for those who are affected. If you know those buzzwords, it helps you with OSHA that you know some of these answers to the test before you get the real test from those inspectors. Authorized employee training and affected employee training. So you need to do some training, a little bit less training for affected employees, but you need to do a lot more for those authorized employees. Okay, here's the other part. And so you need to have those written programs. You need to have training for the employees, for the affected, and for the authorized employees. You need to have periodic inspections to make sure that those authorized employees are following those procedures and are locking it out properly, so you're not caught with a photograph that you saw on that previous slide over there. One little story here. It wasn't in the printing industry, it was a machine shop, and they had a serious accident. Somebody amputated fingers, machine shop. Okay, they showed up, and the people there at the company says, what are we supposed to do? We have, look at all of our procedures, they're all right here. Training, we have lots of training for those employees. OSHA inspector says, did you do any periodic inspections to make sure that they're following the procedures? No, we told them what to do, and they cited them for that last part being missed. They see you as the enforcer for the safety program in your company. All right, so the equipment-specific procedures, they can be posted on each piece of equipment. You can have them in a binder, doesn't really matter, and you need to have somebody be responsible to making sure that those procedures make sense to other people that are going to use those procedures, and change them if you need to change them because they don't make sense for the other maintenance guy. They make sense for this guy, not that guy. Try to make sure that they make sense for anybody who's going to be authorized to work on that equipment. Okay, the other common citation we have here is the Hazard Communication Standard, or it's also called the Right to Know Standard. Very, very common citation, not just with printers, but for I think companies throughout the United States. What you need to make sure is that you have an inventory of your hazardous chemicals, and you can cover that by having that table of contents in your SDS binder. You have to have a written program for Right to Know or HAZCOM, okay? You need to make sure that all your containers are labeled. You need to have safety data sheets, not MSDSs, safety data sheets, SDSs. You know, one of the things when Kathy and I go around and we do audits and that kind of stuff is that you can actually probably impress your OSHA inspector if the guy says, where's your MSDSs? And your employee says, well, we don't have MSDSs. We have safety data sheets. And maybe you'll get a little extra credit because you kind of know a little bit, maybe a little bit more than the OSHA guys. So they're called safety data sheets, and here's why. We'll talk about that. And you need to train those people who are routinely exposed to the chemicals, all right? So what's happened over the past few years is that this standard got a big change because they wanted to make it more universal, more kind of common throughout the whole world. So the manufacturers had to come up with these pictograms on their labels. You can see these red bordered examples over here. They needed to have this information, and they needed to have these signal words on their labeling system. So you need to cover these changes with your employees and make sure that they're aware of these changes. I think this is going to be a very common thing that OSHA is going to talk about in your company. All right. This is what an example looks like for, it's not a chemical that we have over here, but I think it's a nice example of a chemical label that's compliant with the new regulation over here. It's got to have the name of the chemical. It's got to have that signal word in number 2. It's got to have those pictograms in number 3. It's got to have the hazard statements, which explain why they picked the pictograms. It also has to have these precautionary statements, and it needs to tell you who made the product and contact information. So not only did they make changes to the labeling part of the program, they made changes to safety data sheets. Now, besides changing the word from MSDS to SDS, all the manufacturers say that it's got to be in this kind of format. So my recommendation, everybody else over there, take a look at your MSDS, SDS book. Make sure that if you have MSDSs, get the new one. Sometimes you have to use a password to get into that website, to download the safety data sheet. Sometimes you'll see an icon on the manufacturer's website that says MSDS. Just click on that. It might give you the safety data sheet. It should be on the top of the document, say the words safety data sheet. Now, sometimes if the chemical is no longer manufactured, you can put a note on that sheet and say it's no longer manufactured. This is what we got to keep, the old MSDS. But they could definitely look at those books, and if they see a lot of MSDSs, there's your citation in the mail. I think they've used the term, one OSHA guy has said, education by citation. They kind of like that. Now, what we can do for our labeling actually is, if we can't fit all that information that you saw on the previous slide on our containers, our metal cans, plastic bottles, or what have you, we can still go with the old labeling system where we got to have the name of the chemical, and we need to have these numbers in these colored sections on the chemical label, the health, flammability, reactivity section of your label. But what we cannot have is this situation. And in my experience, what I've seen is that if they see one thing like this and they see a lot of good attempts at labeling a lot of other containers, the inspector might say, you got to put a label on this thing, and let you go on that. If they see a lot of this going on out there, that they can't read the label, they can't see a label on those chemical containers that are out there, they're probably going to give you a citation. Training, basically people are routinely exposed. Include information on the new labeling system. Include information on the safety data sheet format. It's already been long gone, so if you haven't done it, my advice is get to it as soon as you can. If you need help, reach out to Kathy and Paul. All right, and you need to include this information in your training program. All right, safety data sheets. Like I said, they're in a standardized format now, so that on any data sheet, you're going to always see, let's see if memory serves me correct. Section 4, first aid information. I think that was right. Well, that's what Kathy and I do for a living all the time. So you're always going to see Section 4, first aid information on the new safety data sheet format. We can't really debate if their data sheet is including all the information on there. We got to pretty much accept, if you got a question, you can go back to the manufacturer or let OSHA handle it with your manufacturer if they're trying to hide something from you guys. Okay, so the original containers have got to have this information on it. It's interesting that I've seen, not too often, but sometimes the boxes and containers coming in from your suppliers and manufacturers still got the old stuff on it. You know, that's really old. That's a long time. So it all should have this new information on there, but that's on them. That's on them. Because they had to have these new labels on by 2015. Okay, here's our next topic we're going to talk about over here. Very common citation for printers. You might have guessed it, machine guarding. What we're looking at here is anything that might have a pinch point, crush point on your equipment. Don't get caught in the situation where it's old machinery, you bought it from somebody else and it didn't come with guards. So what? They're going to cite you on it? Go get the guards. Make the guards. It doesn't really matter. I'm not sure if this printer is on this, but I remember when they went through their inspection, thousands of dollars in work and citations on machine guarding, and all this guy had was a bunch of pencils in his hand, and all he did was just put stuff into machines. If it busted a pencil, he wanted a guard. If it busted a pencil, he wanted a guard. So this is a tough one for us. Especially old equipment.
Hey, Paul.
One thing to keep, yeah.
We have a
Go
question
ahead, Kathy.
to safety data sheets. Somebody has a question. Are we required to have paper copies on site if we subscribe to an online service?
If you subscribe to an online service and you can get that, you know, quickly within hours, you're fine. You're fine. The one thing that you got to be cautious of when companies go through that process is that if you have a power failure, you need to have a backup system. So if you have them on, on your software or what have you, you still got to produce something. So if your power goes down, you got to get to that information. But if you can get to it within a few hours, you're good to go.
And we have one
Any
more.
other comments, Kathy, on that one?
Yep, we got one
Yep.
more. This has to do with machine guarding. Are there any examples
Mhm.
of fathered equipment for machine guarding? Maybe Heidelberg cylinders or pot Devon glue or something like that.
Well, I think it might be better if you contact Kathy or Paul, afterwards, share some photographs and stuff, especially for Heidelberg cylinders. That's a tough one. We've got some recommendations. We've got some stories as to how far they can push you. I think you better contact us a little bit later on that kind of stuff. It is tough. I think my advice usually is get your stuff pretty well guarded. If they see one or two pieces of equipment that's kind of old, they might just talk to you about guarding that thing, or you might say, well, we're going to get rid of that old Heidelberg, windmill, we don't use that anymore. See, it's unplugged, and then you're going to get rid of it. Then they won't cite you for it. But some of those old things are really tough to guard, and if they're going to look at that particular item, it could be really tough. So I think my advice is to contact us later on. Bench grinders cost a lot of money to make sure that the gaps are not correct on the bench grinders. You saw one of those, but the guy's glove got caught in there. But it's the one on the right side over there. There's a tool rest that needs to get cinched up within 1/8 of an inch of that grinding wheel, and the tongue guard is the one that comes from the top, and that's got to get cinched within 1/4 of an inch. The fines for that is more than a brand new bench grinder. We're talking $500 or more. I think even in Iowa, one of the printers got cited for something that was even more than that. So it's ridiculous, it's tough, but have people take a look at that clearance. They're taking a look at eye wash facilities, the fire extinguishers, things like that, so you can get to it. They're looking at that. They're making sure that if you saw a sign above that eye wash station, you need to also inspect those fire extinguishers and eye wash stations. And if you have an eye wash station that is not plumbed in, you need to make sure that you change out that solution periodically before the expiration date, because the solution in there does not last forever. It might cause some bacterial growth in it. So they're taking a look at these kind of things here. Electrical thing is something they're going to take a look at. If there's exposed wiring on electrical cords, ground plugs missing, they can cite that. I know one printer, he was not a printer, big company, high-tech company in the Twin Cities over here. They had one electrical cord like that. All the other ones were perfect. They actually had no other problems at all. They cited that as a serious and would not budge on negotiating in an informal conference. So, but again, if you can take care of that and they only find one, the particular inspector might let it go, especially if you can show that you threw it in the dumpster right away and got rid of it. So they're going to take a look at not only extension cords out there, they're going to take a look at missing ground plugs. Also, they're going to take a look at open circuits. Look at your electrical panels, especially the old ones, and make sure that there's a circuit breaker in it. And if there's a hole there, it's got to get covered up by a plastic block there, plastic covering. Also making sure that those electrical panels have 36 inches clearance so people can get to them. That's a common citation with us printers. Now we're going to shift gears to another standard, and maybe you can kind of guess as to what that standard is. How about that guy? Well, he's using his ingenuity there. Hang on. It's powered industrial trucks or material handling vehicles. Very common citation for us. Couple of things you need to be aware of over here. You need to have training for those people who are using the fork trucks, the cherry pickers, the powered hand dollies. So you need to have training for those people who are using that equipment. And if you want to know more about this standard and how to cover all this kind of stuff, go to Kathy's class. We don't have a lot of them. There's probably going to be another one that's going to be happening in the springtime or May time frame, that kind of thing. and find out all the details. But you have to have training for these operators of this equipment, and you need to have inspections of the equipment. Sometimes inspectors have looked at both items. I've heard stories where inspectors have just gone for training records. I've heard one inspector say that they didn't even ask about training records. They just wanted to know, are you doing inspections of your forklifts? That's all that they looked at. And I said, are you sure that that's all they wanted to look at? Yeah. So we had those records. We show that people do inspect them and they document. And when they document a problem, they do tell somebody about it and get it fixed. All right. Here's another one that people will take a look at from an Osha, compressed air. See those little holes there on that slide over there? That's what we're talking about, making sure that you maintain that 30 pounds per square inch when it's dead-ended. So when that air nozzle gets hit against someone's skin or arm, that there's a pressure relief on the side. That's what the holes are there for. So make sure that you take a look at those things that people use as blow-off guns to clean their clothes off from dirt or dust or what have you, that they have those kind of safety nozzles on. So they'll take a look at that too. Floor guarding, if you've got elevated areas where people store stuff, make sure that there's a railing up there, 42 inches from the top rail to the floor. They'll take a look at those areas for floor guarding. Here's another area that I think that they're still going to take a look at. They've threatened that they're going to have a standard for combustible dust, because this issue was in the news many, many years ago with grain elevators, with other industries that have had fires and actually explosions. They pick on printers when they see situations like this, where they see this dust accumulated around balers. It looks this thick or it looks this thick, and they're going to cite us for that. There's not a specific standard for it, but they're going to cite us for it because they're concerned that we have the same kind of hazard, which I don't think we do, but they think that we have the same kind of hazard as a grain elevator does when we have this accumulation in our area. So again, if you want to know more about that, contact us and we can talk you through that situation too, if you have balers and if you have this kind of accumulated dust and dirt in this area. All right, actually we're doing pretty good on time. So I guess I could have told you more stories early on. But anyway, let's go through these slides here on trying to better prepare for an OSHA inspection. First rule of thumb is ignorance is no excuse. It might work when you're stopped on the side of the road and you didn't know supposedly what the speed limit sign did say when this trooper pulls you on the side, but this one doesn't cut you any slack. As a matter of fact, like I mentioned earlier in the presentation, some of the inspectors like this education by citation. They think that that's what they're here to do, is to educate people, and to educate them by giving them a citation is what they're there out there to do. So if you don't know, they're going to definitely hit this one really hard. So ignorance is no excuse. The other thing to keep in mind is that even if you're in process of writing your lockout procedures and you're not done yet, admit that they're not done. Admit that you know what the standard says. You're in process of getting it done. It's going to go a lot better than trying to say you don't know anything about the standard. They may actually come away with no citation. That's happened to one of our bigger printers in Minnesota here, where they did not have the procedures done. They finally ran out of time to get them done. They asked us to write them for them, and all they could say to OSHA is that, well, we're contacting and working with PIM to get those procedures done. They weren't done. They didn't get a citation, though, because they knew what the problem was, and they have a plan of action to take care of it. All right. As I mentioned a little bit earlier at the beginning of this presentation here, get management involvement. If they're responsible for making sure people show up for work, they show up on time, they don't swear, whatever your rules are, they need to be accountable for all the safety stuff too. So get them involved so that they can commit and provide their leadership. Document. Another important thing that we run across is that if you've said you've done this training or that training, you got nothing to show to prove it, it doesn't count. They can question maybe how well you've done the training or how well the document is, but if you have no document, you're really out of luck. So just make sure that you document stuff somehow in a program, policy, procedure, what have you, you gotta show the information. Okay, fourth rule of thumb, be proactive, not reactive. You want to try to do things like, even when you're have all this information, try to start knocking off one topic at a time, and try to work through it. It can be a very exhausting process, but if you got a plan of action, you follow that plan, you tackle one topic per week, per month, what have you. You call and get some help on this particular item or all the items or what have you. Just make sure you let your boss know what you think is at risk over here, so that you can get a plan of action, get this stuff done. Make sure you have employee training, policies, guidelines, rules, what have you. Again, they see you as the employer as the enforcement arm for what's going on in your company, and you may have to ratchet that up. I think we've kind of seen that with some of the recent inspections with Osha, is that we need to ratchet up more the discipline part of the program. Now, you don't have to keep yelling at people right off the bat, but if you can try to understand why they're not using the PPE or the guards and that kind of stuff, and impress upon them, use the last tool as the enforcement part, you got to go down that road. Again, enforce the policies, guidelines, and rules, and investigates all accidents and near misses. So you can really, I know a lot of people are concerned about OSHA penalties and stuff like that, but really a lot of the loss that we see in the safety world is actually on accidents. If you get somebody out on a back injury or carpal tunnel surgery or what have you, you're talking about a lot of money that's going down the road, going out the door. So if you can investigate accidents and near misses, again, in Kathy and our experience is when you start investigating this, you find out that this kind of stuff's happened before. It's like, really? Nobody ever told anybody else about it. So you'll find out that maybe some of these other things have happened to a lesser degree in previous days by some other employees or by the same employee. So try to investigate accidents, have your supervisor investigate accidents and even near misses to try to get ahead of the game, to try to maintain control over the losses in dollars and employees due to unsafe conditions or unsafe acts. Housekeeping is a big thing. I know it is for the OSHA people when they're taking a look at your facility. I remember one of the companies, when they had their inspection, they came away with no citations, and I think the two things that worked for them was, one, they answered a lot of the questions, and they had a lot of stuff when they asked questions, they provided the answer, they provided the information, and number two, it was the housekeeping part. When they saw things pretty neat and organized that was out there, it really set the tone for that inspection completely different when those two inspectors actually walked away with no citations. Rare to happen, but it's possible. Encourage reporting, because that's what you want to do. You want to actually get people to report injuries, unsafe situations, accidents, go to the manager. If they don't feel comfortable going to that supervisor, go to the safety committee member. Even when Kathy and I walk around, sometimes the plant managers get a little upset because the employee came to me, for example, with a concern or a question or what have you. And it's like, it's still better off than coming to somebody internally than to forcing that person's hand because they got no other place to go and to call OSHA and get an employee complaint with OSHA. So encourage that kind of dialogue out there with employees. So you can avoid those particular issues maybe that'll come down the road with an OSHA inspection. Well, actually, I think we're really moving along pretty well in time. Here's our last slide, because you might have seen things here. Again, this is being recorded, so you can go back to particular slides. Maybe you got a pretty good handle on this kind of stuff. You only have a question or two. Reach out to me or Kathy, for advice on a particular issue. Again, if you are lost, my last bit of advice, because there may be a poor person there that got saddled with all this kind of stuff and don't know which way to turn, get us out there to take a look. Sometimes people say, well, but it's still going to cost money if you come through and find all the problems. Well, it's interesting that since I've been here since the year 2000, I think, 22 years, is that when OSHA finds those things and sends you the citations at least on the first inspection, their penalties have always been more than any kind of fees that we would have when we would do an audit at your building for a half a day or a whole day or however long it takes. So reach out. We have no problem with people or do-it-yourselfers. Just reach out. Again, if it's related to any, one other thing on COVID, I forgot to mention this earlier, that if you are not getting our e-newsletters and information, reach out to Ben or Sadie to get on those e-newsletter lists and information. COVID, for example, that one just changed from the federal OSHA people, where they're actually pulling the standard that they were going to try to push, that the Supreme Court said, you know, you're not going to enforce it. They're going to focus on healthcare. That just came out yesterday, effective today with federal OSHA. So the latest on COVID is pretty much, and go to our website again, Kathy put some great information on, since there is not that other requirement that they were talking about for 100 or more employees. We've got some advice on how to handle the COVID stuff in your facility. And reach out to us again on COVID, environmental, whatever, radon, what have you. This has been our life for a long time. Any other questions? I'm amazed I got through this.
Paul, that was incredible. Only a scientist can do 59 slides in under an hour, because he said he was going to. So I think that's
well,
terrific.
I'm a man of my word.
You're a man of your word. Just one quick question, if people might want to stay, is that, you know, people are wondering where is OSHA at right now? Are they on the rise as far as their interactions with print service providers? And do you see that rising over time, or do you see it maybe getting back to normal, or where is it at as far as how it is the occurrences of OSHA contacting our members?
Well, I think it's going to increase, because I know when I would stay in touch with some of the OSHA management people, is that they were inundated with all the COVID stuff. And actually, one of the directors over there was glad that COVID was taking a back seat so they could get back to the inspection kind of stuff that we're normally used to seeing. And federally, it does follow a pattern as to who's in DC. And so I think the money's still going to come through to hire inspectors, hire more inspectors. And Republican or Democrat, they always want to increase the fines. So I don't see this letting up at all. We're not having any less inspections or less inspectors that are going to be out there.
Yeah, terrific. Well,
Kathy,
anything else on that? Oh,
It took me a while to unmute.
there
Sorry
we
about.
go.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I'm kind of hearing the same thing. I've heard that they've hired like at least one or maybe two more inspectors in Minnesota, is what I heard. And so, yeah, I'm not seeing that it's going to go away anytime soon. Yeah.
well, then we're thankful that you're there to take our members' calls as they get prepared for OSHA to perhaps be knocking on that door. So thank you again for your time and expertise. You can always.
I got another story, Steve.
Okay.
I got another story about that.
Please do.
I remember one printer, I don't know if they're on this or not. I just don't say names, and hopefully they don't get offended. But I remember when they're really geographically close to the OSHA office. And I think the owner said, I'm surprised you're here. We've been here for 20 or 30 years, and you've never visited us. Actually, they had a lot of stuff to take care of when they finally showed up, and it was related to a lot of machine guarding stuff.
Yeah, I bet that's happened more than once. So, all right. Well, and thank you so much again. I thought it was a terrific event. People stayed on through the entire time, and I'm sure they appreciated your expertise. We do have thanks to you from attendees on the Q&A. So thank you so much for your time. And again, everyone, the recording will be sent out and made available. And Paul and Kathy are both always available, a phone call or an email away. So thanks, everyone. And we'll see you next time on the next PIM Smart Cafe.